All right, so when we talk about function notation, we've already mentioned this. We talked about this when we did the Kahoot before we started the chapter. Function notation simply means that instead of writing y equals, I'm writing f of x equals. And we talked about how our variables have to match. So if I have the variable x in my equation, then my function should be f of x. And again, those parentheses do not mean multiplication. I'm not multiplying some f value by x. I'm saying the function of the variable x. So all this is saying is I have an equation and it includes the variable x. So now we need to talk about what does it mean when I put a value in there. So the function notation lets us clearly see this input value. So when I see f of -2, that means that my input value is -2, and they want me to find my output value. So we put this value of -2 into our function, always remembering to use parentheses. If we don't use parentheses, we're going to start getting things messed up. So anytime you put a value in, use parentheses to show that this is the value you're putting in. So then I'm going to do the multiplication and get -4 minus 5 gives me -9. I can always write these as an ordered pair. We need to get into the habit of writing these answers as an ordered pair. It's a set of data, our function. I put -2 in, I get out -9 as my output value. Questions about this? You need to know how to do this. This does not mean f times -2. This means the function evaluated at -2. Questions? Then we will move on. Now what we need to do, we need to look at this table and we need to write a function to represent this table. So what we need to look for, the hints that we've got to find some sort of pattern that relates my x values to my y values. So what is happening in this table? What am I doing to x to get y every single time? Graham? Okay, what does that tell me about this problem? When I have a constant change in x and a constant change in y, what does that mean? Zach? Nope. Joe? Nope. Has nothing to do with being continuous or discrete. What does it mean when I have a constant change in x and a constant change in y? Graham? That means it's a linear function. But it doesn't just mean that it's a function, because I didn't say it wasn't a function. I said your answer was incorrect because it was.
Well, I think the correct would be yes, but then
it doesn't matter what you think because this is my classroom. Being a function means that the x values do not repeat. Being a linear function means I have a constant change in x and a constant change in y. So this means that we have a linear function. So when we write our function, we should have some idea of what our function is going to look like, because we know what a linear function looks like. We've seen that already in our 3 families of functions. What other patterns do I notice in this table? What am I doing to the x value to get to my y value? Seth? I'm adding 6 every time. 2 plus 6 is 8. 4 plus 6 is 10, and so on. So this pattern is going to help me actually write my function. And I want to make sure that I am writing my function using those correct terms, like we talked about in this slide here. So I want to take this pattern, and I want to write, what do we think? I think we're missing something. I think this is pretty close, but not quite perfect. Greg? So I need to show that this is a function of the variable x. And then this function represents every time I take the x value and I add 6 to it. So I'm taking x plus 6, and that's always going to give me that range value. How can I tell just looking at this function that it's linear? Not looking at the table, but looking at the function. How do I know this is a linear function? Joe? The highest exponent on x is 1. So I have x to the first power, which also means we have a linear function. Questions about this example? Look for a pattern. How am I getting from x to y? And then that will help you write your function. Make sure if it asks for a function, you write f of x equals x plus 6. If we ask for an equation, that's when we want to see y equals x plus 6. So just make sure you know what you're being asked. Are you being asked for a function or are you being asked for an equation? That will tell you how you need to write your relation. Next problem. We are selling pages for our yearbook, trying to make money. So I need to name my variables. This kind of makes it easy. It tells me that the class sells in pages. So I know that in represents the number of pages that I sell. They tell me that in my problem. What is my other variable going to be? If I need to write a function, what else do I need to include, and what will that represent in this problem? Joe? Well, first, before we write the function, what would this represent in my problem? Okay, in this problem, f of n does replace y. What would it be in this problem, Jason? It's what? Well, n represents x, so this is my independent. This is my dependent, which represents what in this problem, in words? What does this mean in this problem? We're getting there, Seth. How much money we're going to earn or our profit. So they say the money we're going to earn or the profit that we are going to make. So I am writing a function, the class sells in pages, and I want to know how much money we're going to earn. So if I use the variable n, that has to match f of n, a function of the variable n. And now I need to use this information to write a function. Where did the 25 come from? What? Okay, I earn $25 per page of advertising. So let's say, not even thinking about our function, let's just think about this. If I earn $25 for every page, how much would I earn if I sold 4 pages? $100? What'd you do to get that number, Joe? Okay, so we took 25 times the number of pages, and that told me how much money I would make. So is this function correct? Does this function show 25 times the number of pages? Yeah. So here is our function for this problem. You could have written it f of n equals 25n. That doesn't really matter. Normally we see the function first, but they mean the exact same thing. With an equal sign, that order is interchangeable. I can flip them on different sides and it doesn't change the value at all. So my profit is going to be given to me by taking 25 times the number of pages that I sell. That will tell me my profit. Questions about this one? Make sure if this isn't what you had on your paper that you are fixing it so that you have the correct answer when you go to take a quiz or when you are studying for a test. All right, example 3. We're selling some ornaments. And we need to write a function to show the profit as a function of the number of ornaments sold. So I got to name my variables. I have 2 different things I'm talking about. I have to name these variables. What should the first variable be, and what should that represent in this problem? Seth? Okay, what would f of x represent? Which one would depend on the other? Would the profit depend on the number sold? Yes? So the dependent variable represents the profit, because the profit depends on how many ornaments we sell. If you want to use, I wouldn't ever suggest using the variable O, because that looks like a zero a lot when you start using that in equations. Just not that you can't, but just my suggestion. It gets kind of confusing and looks like a zero. But if you wanted to use the variable N again, or if you wanted to use S, just make sure you name that variable and make sure these match. X matches F of X. So I have the number of ornaments sold, and I'm comparing that to the profit. And now I need to write a function. Where do we get the 3.5 from? Jason?
It's the amount that is sold for
Each ornament cost me $3.50. So if I multiply $3.50 times the number of ornaments, here's the money I'm going to make from my ornaments. Why am I subtracting 75 from this equation? Where did I get that from in this problem? Alex, what do you think? So before we could sell these ornaments and make money, we had to pay $75. So if I want to find my actual profit, how much money did I profit from this fundraiser, I have to subtract my initial cost. Here's how much we're going to make, but here's how much we had to pay before we sold these ornaments. So I have to subtract that, and then I know, okay, how much money did I actually raise for a fundraiser or whatever you are doing in this problem. Yep, fundraiser. Questions about that one? On your notes or on a separate sheet of paper, you should have some room at the bottom if you want to just pull out a blank sheet of paper. I want you to be working on this example. So write down the function and then use these input values to find the corresponding output. Make sure you are using the correct notation. The only thing I'm going to recommend about this first one is that we use parentheses. It's not nearly as important as this one, but it will be later on. So make sure you are showing, I'm taking this value of 2 and I'm squaring it. I put 2 into my function, so use those parentheses as you are working on these. I should see on your paper f of 6 equals the value of 6 squared plus 4. What do I get for this f of 6, Graham? 40. 36 plus 4 gives me 40. I could also write all of these as ordered pairs. What would be my ordered pair for this first input value? Graham? I put 2 in. I got 8 out. What would be my ordered pair for this second input value, Seth? I put in 6. I got out 40. This third problem is where those parentheses become so important, because when I have f of -3, the way that it's written here means -1 times 3 squared, which would give me a value of -9. But what I want is I want to put -3 into my function. So I want to take the value of -3 and square that to get 9, positive 9, which I would add to 4 to get 13. I put -3 in, I get 13 out. Make sure you are using those parentheses. Take your domain value, put it in parentheses wherever you see an X, and then simplify from there. Negative symbols can throw off your entire answer very easily. Questions about that one? All right, I want to do this last problem here, very similar to the last example that we did. We invest $209 to buy shirts, and we sell them for $9.50 each. So So I need to name my variables. What are my variables going to represent in this problem? Seth? What about the shirts? Well, what about them? The color of them, the size of them? Okay, so the color of the shirts we're buying, the size, Greg? The cost, do I know the cost? Yes, so is my variable going to represent the cost? No, because I know that. Jason? Okay, one of my variables will represent the profit. Is that the independent or the dependent? Okay, so the dependent variable will represent the profit. What about the shirts is going to represent my independent variable? We said it's not the cost. What, Jason? The number of shirts that I'm selling. So we just want to make sure that we are being clear because there can be a lot of different things about shirts. We had cost, we could talk about the color, the size, the picture on them. There's a lot of different things about shirts. In this problem, we're talking about how many shirts are we selling. So I'm going to make my independent variable S because we're talking about shirts. You don't have to. You can make it X. You can make it Q. I don't care what letter you make it. Just tell me what it means. If my independent variable is S and I want to write a function, what should my dependent variable look like? Zach? F of S. Those variables have to match. Now that I have my variables named, what will my function look like for this problem? Zach? What about that 209? What should I do with that? Because I spent 209, I'm going to earn $9.50 per shirt. So I have to subtract what I spent from the money that I'm going to make. This next question wants me to find the profit after selling 24 shirts. So does 24 represent the independent or the dependent variable? Which is which one? The independent variable. So I'm going to find f of 24. I'm going to use my function. I'm going to substitute in 24. Seth, that's not you. You're not all dressed up and fancy today. I don't think you're going to sing. So we substitute in that value of 24. Everybody should have a calculator out and be figuring up how much money did we make from selling 24 shirts. Raise your hand when you have an answer. Will, what do you got? $19. We're talking about the profit. I'm finding the profit, so my label is going to be in dollars. If I sell 24 shirts, I make $19. The last part of this problem wants me to find the number of shirts I would need to sell to get my investment, or this is what we call break even, my break even point. So I want to find how many shirts should I sell to get back my investment. What would my profit be if I just break even? Jacob? It'd be 0. Where should I put 0 into this function? Jacob? So the number of shirts is 0? Which one is 0? The profit. So which one should I replace with 0? What?
that'd be 209. No, this is
No, 209 is still the money that I spent. We said S is the number of shirts, so I don't want to put 0 in for S. Where should I put 0? They still cost 9.5 each. I've got to put it somewhere. Greg? Okay, we said 24 was still the number of shirts. So 24 represented S, which was the number of shirts. I'm not selling 0 shirts, because then that means I've completely wasted $209 by not selling any shirts. That's the answer, so. It has nothing to do with this problem here. We need to get this answer, we have to look back at our original function. What is 0 if I break even? The profit. What represented our profit? F of S. So I have to replace F of S with 0. Because if I break even, I make $0. I've simply just made back my investment. Now what I need to do is I need to solve for S. I have to figure out what is S. What's my first step to solving for S? Zach? Add 209 on each side. You also could have subtracted 9.5S on both sides. Either will work. What's next? Jacob? Buy? Where? Okay, what do I get? 22 what? Shirts. So if I sell 22 shirts, I make $0. I just simply break even. I make back my investment. So businesses do this kind of stuff all the time. They weigh the benefits, the pros and cons. Is it worth my money to invest? Do I think I'm going to sell more than 22 shirts? Because if you don't think you're going to sell more than 22 shirts, your investment really isn't worth it. It's not worth it to go get shirts just to break even if you're trying to make money. You want to sell more. Do you think that you can double your money? Do you think that you can just break even? Is this worth buying these items? So not that all of you are going to go into business, but these types of equations show up a lot. It doesn't matter where you're working at or what kind of business that you are doing. You want to know, are you going to make money or not? Because otherwise you're not really running a business. You want to make money. So that's what they do. They kind of weigh the pros and cons. Is it worth the investment? Questions about this one? Here is your homework for this section.